Novar's newest controller, the ES3.S, is a drop-in replacement for the Savvy. While the controller is hot swappable, it is still recommended to disconnect any power sources prior to beginning the installation. Note that while the Savvy in this video includes an onboard LCD, most Savvies do not. An XEM LCD can be added to provide a user interface if needed. To install, first remove the two securing screws at the bottom of the Savvy with a hex wrench and remove the bottom panel. Next, disconnect the Cat5 cable. After that, loosen the two retaining hex screws at the base of the Savvy electronics assembly. Some models may have a prying notch on the transition board to assist in the initial separation of the assembly from the transition board. Lift the assembly by pushing up with both hands to remove. Depending on the installation, the next steps may be required. The first is some Savvy installations utilize 3 metal oxide varistors, or MOVs, on the transition board, located behind terminals 58 to 62. You should be able to identify these behind the board with a mirror, or you may have to remove the transition board to inspect by removing the 6 securing hex screws. Other MOVs will be present. Only the 3 behind terminals 58 to 62 should be removed. To remove, simply snip the wires close to the soldering point and discard. If a current limiting device is wired in series with the relative humidity sensor, it will also need to be removed. Simply disconnect the wires from the transition board, remove the current limiter, and rewire the sensor directly to the input. The next step will depend on if the transition board has an Underwriters Laboratories Inc. label. If the UL mark is present, you can skip the next step regarding the outdoor light sensor. If there is no UL mark on the transition board, you will need to relocate the outdoor light sensor wire from terminal 58 to terminal 62, where it will share a terminal with the positive wire of the outdoor temp sensor. Regarding the outdoor temp sensor, the original Novar OTS sensor is not compatible with the ES3S and will need to be updated to the OTS2 if used. At this point, you can now install the ES3S electronics assembly. Simply slide the ES3S assembly into the panel as the Savvy had been previously. It is important to line up the top of the assembly so that it slides behind the panel, and may need adjustment at the bottom to correctly align the connectors between the boards. Once aligned, press firmly to ensure a good connection, and retighten the retaining hex screws to lock in place. The ES3S adds an additional 3 RS-485 communication ports. The communication shield terminals will need to be grounded back to the main transition board to ensure steady communication. If the main transition board is not properly grounded, that should be corrected at this time as well. You can now plug in the Cat5 cable and return power to the system. Note, similar to the Savvy, no Ethernet link lights are provided. Communication heartbeat can be confirmed at the switch or router. You can now slide the lower cover into the bottom of the panel and replace securing hex screws to complete the installation. Note that the ES3S has a wireless antenna port for future use at the top of the panel. The dust cover should be left in place until an antenna is added in the future.